Italian design, exotic, bespoke, high class, one of a kind, parts bin taillights, Nissan headlights, gated shifter. Oh, there goes the clutch again. Italian design. This series is finally back, so let's talk about the Lamborghini Freaking Diablo. Starting in 1990, the Diablo was a successor to the Countach, and unlike the somewhat dinky Countach that our dearest Jay Leno could hardly fit in, the Diablo was thick. However, this design wasn't flawless, as it was lopsided, in the sense that the Diablo was actually way wider in the rear than it was in the front. This meant that if you're clearing through things like entrances, for example, just because the front of your Diablo could fit through, that doesn't actually mean the whole car can. Regardless, all was forgiven, as this short sight had a justified existence for being home to a massive dual overhead cam 5.7 liter V12 that almost made 500 horsepower. Now, given those numbers, you'd probably think the Diablo had a crazy fast 0 to 60, to which you'd be wrong. It was only 4.6 seconds, and I know 4.6 seconds is really fast for the time period, but I just have to mention this. You know how everyone rags on the first generation Acura NSX for being slow? Yeah, well, that car had a 0 to 60 of 4.8 seconds and about half the horsepower the Diablo does. Also, the first generation Viper had a 0 to 60 of 4.5 seconds, and it did this while having less horsepower and 2 less cylinders. I love the Diablo for what it is. It is very sexy, but it's not on some untouchable pedestal. People act like European exotics have always been way ahead of their American and Japanese counterparts since the beginning of time. They really weren't. So next time you hear someone constantly make fun of the NSX for being slow, and if they dare throw out the, "oh, it was slow even for its time period" phrase, make sure to figuratively and literally shove your phone into their face while playing this exact part of the video. Disclaimer, this is a joke, as I am not responsible for any legal repercussions this may cause. Anyways, back to the Diablo. In 1995, a faster, lighter, more powerful, and more track-focused trim for the Diablo would be released, and it was known as a Super Veloce, which is a nameplate given to the end of the V12 generations, except for the modern Aventadors, which went SVJs. We're not going to talk about in this video, though. We're just going to talk about the Diablo. Anyways, the SV Diablo was actually the cheapest Diablo when purchased brand new. It was even cheaper than the base model Diablo. Lamborghini's logic was they decided to price the SV cheaper because the car was lighter, which meant that it used less resources to make and therefore had less production overhead. That means that the consumers could get the savings passed on to them, which is very thoughtful and considerate of Lamborghini. And from a modern day perspective, this is kind of funny because the cheapest Diablos from brand new are now currently the most expensive Diablos used. This kind of showed that the 90s was truly a different time period where weight reduction was actually seen as a sacrifice noteworthy of discount instead of a feature that comes with a markup like it does in modern times. Gosh darn, simpler times, let me tell you. But perhaps the greatest thing about the 90s were the pop-up headlights, and they looked astounding on the Diablo. But unfortunately, they didn't stay for long, because by the time 1999 rolled around, Lamborghini had facelifted the car and replaced them with freaking Nissan headlights. I'm not joking. They are literally Nissan 300ZX headlights. Now, you're probably not that surprised, and you're probably thinking, bladed, we already know the whole headlight debate. But what if I told you that there are a lot more components on the Diablo that also are not bespoke to it, some of which may make you even see the Diablo in a whole new light? And the taillights are just run-of-the-mill lights that were made for buses. But hey, at least the Diablo isn't alone in this embarrassment, as the Celine S7 and Spiker C8, the early Pagani Zondas, and McLaren F1 also use these taillights. However, that isn't the end for the shared parts of the Diablo, as the engine itself was not bespoke to the Diablo either. The American supercar company Vector was at the time owned by Megatech, who also owned Lamborghini. If you're still wiping away your tears after watching my Vector M12 video, you would know that the M12 also used the Diablo's 5.7 liter V12. Even the body style of the Lamborghini Diablo wasn't safe from this sharing, as most of the Diablo's dimensions were borrowed by the Successor V16T and just modified slightly, which to no one's surprise, the Successor V16T also uses a V16, which also uses more Lamborghini parts. In this case, it is 2 Lamborghini 8 cylinders shoved together. I don't know the details specifically, more on that in some future video about it. Now, I'm not saying that the Lamborghini Diablo was all about shared parts, as it did have some unique features. To this day, it is one of the few supercars to go through 2 facelifts and 3 body styles in one generation, having its first facelift in 1999 where they removed the pop-up headlights, and then facelifting it again in 2000 when Audi changed things up with Lamborghini because they had recently purchased them in 1998. But what Audi ended up doing is they ended up making the front wider, about the same width as the rear, and just overall sexier. The fender flares look so much nicer, a lot better, and just a lot more aggressive, cooler, but sleeker and smooth, and a much more modern design that, in my opinion, is timeless. And that is honestly my most favorite Diablo of all of them. This new Diablo would feature a 6-liter V12 that had an astonishing 600 horsepower, which resulted in a 0 to 60 time of 4 seconds flat. Another unique thing about the Diablo is that it would be known as the last V12 Lamborghini to ever be sold from factory with a rear-wheel drive variant. So what did we learn in this video? Well, we've learned that the Lamborghini Diablo honestly isn't as bespoke or super rare as everyone thinks it is. There existed a time where even Lamborghini had to resort to using cheap parts. Yet, in spite of that, the Diablo still succeeded in being nothing short of beautiful. To this day, its design is still timeless and breathtaking. Its performance was record-breaking. And even being constantly juggled between one company to another, it still managed to maintain its identity as the Lamborghini Freaking Diablo. Bladed Angel, out.